you. Well, how are you guys doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Okay, so this is a first for us because we usually don't do our trainings like this, but you know, we're in the world of COVID right now. So this training is usually an all-day training. What we've kind of done is it goes over the training manual like you would do in September. But what we have done is we've taken out some of the stuff. Most of the stuff that we took out, it all is everything that like money's not tied to it. So it's just we wanted to cover the main important information. So we have it slated for 4 hours. We don't know how long this will go. I don't think it will go the full 4 hours, but we want to make sure you guys can answer your any questions you guys have. Please feel free. You can type them in, or you can undo your microphone, and you can definitely ask any questions throughout. We have some trainings where we turn the mics off where you can only chat in, but we usually have like 300 people or 200 people on the call. We wanted to keep this one small. I think, like I said, there's 4, maybe 6 will be at the most. So it's a small group, so feel free to ask your questions because that's why we're here too, is to make sure we get all your questions answered. Do you guys have anything that you want to start out with, or do you have anything? And I'm hoping, I mean, we will take a break, and if you guys need to take a break, I understand. So, but if it is the 4 hours, I'll definitely make sure we get a break in there, a small one, to at least get up and stand up or use the restroom and all that kind of stuff. But I understand it is also live. So if you do need to go take a phone call or anything like that, I completely understand. So we will go ahead and get started. Do you guys have a copy of your manual? I don't know if you have one or not. We do have one in in resource library. So we will send them out for the new year in September. But just so you guys know, a consultant is in there. It's on page 4 of the training manual. I don't know if any of you guys had Denise Wieland at one point, but she is gone, and Leanne has taken her spot. But so for a while, if you do have Leanne, she is probably getting help from other consultants helping her out in her territory. You can always call us at any time call your consultant for technical assistance. And then again, if you have any other questions, you can call the state office. Okay, integrity. Integrity is a big thing with USDA. All of our reviews are now unannounced. I think this upcoming year will be our 3rd year going into unannounced reviews. We were one of the only states that were not doing them, but all reviews are unannounced, and you can get reviewed every 2 to 3 years. If you happen to be SD, say this year, you will get reviewed again next year, and it will be a full review. So if you happen to be SD this year, you will get another review next year. Again, it will be unannounced. And then if you are SD, you do have to take this training within 60 days of the exit conference. And we apologize for not having it for a while, but I know how you guys are too. It's just been super crazy with this whole coronavirus COVID thing. So, and then all of your records must be kept at the center at all times and always be readily available. So even if you're not there, someone should know where they're at. So if a consultant comes in, then they can have access to your records. Okay, this is the website right here to get on to. It's where your application is. It's also where you claim. But this is your application agreement. We have on the side panel where you can see the USDA website, the eligibility and rate scale. We have access to the food buying guide, but the resource library is the main one. We have the training manual in there, and we also have interactive forms. So some of the forms that are in the book are also located in there, and they're like in Excel. So they'll do some of the calculations for you. One of the most popular ones is the receipts. It will add up your receipts for you, and the expenditure worksheet. So just a reminder that our fiscal year for child nutrition is October 1 to September 30th. So when you are keeping your records, if you can keep them by year, and again, October 1 starts the new fiscal year, and then September 30th will end. So as of October 1, we'll be going into our fiscal year 2021, which is hard to believe. Okay, we're going to go over some of the basic responsibilities, like what are some of the required documentation that you must have. The application for participation. So every year in October, I think it's going to come out in September. That's when you'll redo your application with us, the one that's online where your claim is. So again, you have to have that done every year to be able to claim. We're also talking about if anybody contracts, and then we won't talk as much about we'll talk about the budget and any other questions you have about the budget. So when you get into the system, and if you can look here on the left-hand side, it's kind of depending on, it's like either a khaki or a mustard color. You'll see an apple up at the top, but if you look down and what's highlighted is the resource library. And that's where you will find all your information. Like you can see where there's a training manual, there's memos in there. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, I think it says worksheets. And that's where all the interactive worksheets are located. As you can see right here, this is at the very bottom. Those are a lot of the worksheets that we have. If there's any other things that you guys want that are interactive forms, let us know. It's not that hard for us to turn them interactive, but we can definitely do that for you. So to be on child nutrition, some other important things besides integrity is viability, capability, and accountability. So for a center to be on our program, they have to be financially viable. They have to have adequate financial resources to operate on a daily basis. So and this has happened for a couple of years, is sometimes USDA, because of budgeting for them, they sometimes don't release the funds for child nutrition in October. Sometimes, I mean, it waits a while, so we can't pay until USDA releases those funds to us. Well, you have to be able to operate without using our funds. What the whole point of the program is to help you serve more nutritious meals to kids. You also have to be capable. You have to have staff. Your staffing has to be adequate. You have to be administratively capable to do the paperwork and ability to manage the operation. And then accountability is you need to have institution oversight with like the record keeping, the training, the cost for the program, any authorized expenses and things like that. So the things that are in red are a lot of the things that we're going to cover. We'll definitely talk about the eligibility documentation, record keeping, and the menu as served forms. We will also talk about infants. Do you guys have infants?
No.
No? So if you guys don't have, you may type in the comment section if you have at risk, if you have infants, or if you do any contracting mills. If you do any of those, you can type it in that chat. If you don't do those, I will not cover it to make time go by. But if you don't do any of those, we'll skip over it when we get to that. So the first thing is the enrollment form. So the enrollment form is required every year. It does not replace the application. The application is what tells them if you're getting reimbursed free or reduced, or if they're paid. But the enrollment form tells us when they're enrolled in your center. The enrollment form is one per child. So even if you have like the income application is per household, but the enrollment form is per child, and on there they put the normal days in care. So if it's a child that's say 6 and they're normally in school, on the enrollment form they'll put what they normally are during the school year because they're mostly in school. You don't have to have another one during summer. We understand during summer breaks and that stuff that they'll probably be at your center all the time, but it needs to be normal hours. And when people have multiple kids, a lot of times they're not on the same, some may be there all day, some may be there part of the day. So that's why we need the enrollment form. So the family size and income application, it has to be completed by the parent. No one else can fill it out but the parent. When they fill this out, this is what tells you if they're free, reduced, or paid. Again, this is something that must be done every year. If we come out and you have last year's, like when we come out, say we come out in February, past October 1, say we come out in December or January, and you're using applications from the last year, all those kids should be on the paid because those are not valid applications. You have to use the application per that current year. And we'll discuss the two ways that you approve. One is categorical, and the other is family size and income. So the categorical on the application, you'll put the child's name, you'll put their case number, and it has to be an Oklahoma case number. We don't really see that much here in Oklahoma City since we're in central Oklahoma of another state. But a case number is their SNAP, TANF, or FITPR. And if it's a SNAP, TANF, or FITPR, the SNAP and TANF, they have to, the first number, the first of this set, it has to be, start with an A, B, C, D, H, J, or T, and then followed by 6 or 9 digits to be a SNAP or a TANF. Sometimes they'll put their 16-digit number on there. That's the number on their card, but you actually need their case number. So you'll just contact the family and say, hey, can you please, I need to put the case number on there. FITPR, usually what we see with that is for Indian, it's if anybody gets commodities off of an Indian reservation. So that's what that is. And a lot of times we see the number as their social security number. But I don't know if you'll be getting anything from FITPR in this area. But again, some people that get, not if they have an Indian roll card, this is if they are actually getting commodities from an Indian reservation. So on the categorical eligible, you cannot go over to like your EBT machine and like say, oh, well, this parent, they swipe in, so I'm just going to put that number on the application. You can't do that. The reason why is because just because they have an EBT and they're swiping in for childcare services, that means that they get childcare benefits. That does not mean that they are eligible for free lunch, for free meals. I have some friends that have done foster to adopt, and foster kids get childcare assistance, but the family makes too much money for free meals. So if a parent can put something on there, but if just because they swipe in does not mean they're automatically get free meals. So just make sure you're not going up to the machine and writing it down. Now, if they do get SNAP and stuff, it may be the same number, but the parent needs to put that in. It does not need to be coming in. The center shouldn't be writing that down. When we were talking earlier about if they put their 16-digit number on there, then you can just call the parent and ask for that case number, the one that starts with the letter. And if you do that, if you add or make any changes to the application, then you have to make a note that, you called the parent on this day to get the case number and you talked to so-and-so and date it and do like a little either signature or something. So you can write on the application, but you need to tell us who you talked to, that you're the one that did it. So that way we have the documentation of why somebody else put something on the application. So on the application, you just need one SNAP or TANF number or FITPR, and it qualifies everybody in the household for free meals. So on the application, you need the children enrolled, you need the SNAP number, and you need a signature from someone in the household. Now, if they put income on the application, you can just disregard the income. You don't have to look at it. That used to be different in the past, but all you need is children enrolled, and then also you'll have to have listed the household members someplace else. And then all the SNAP or TANF number, and then a parent signature. You do not need the last 4 of the social security number if it's approved by SNAP or TANF. So if you have an application and it has a foster child on there, the foster child must be marked, and that child will automatically be free. The foster child will be free. Now, if there are other children on that application with the foster child, they are not automatically free. That will go based on if they have a SNAP number or if there's income on there. So foster kids are free, but that does not automatically qualify everybody in the household. And it is for those kids that are awarded to the state. So if you have a parent, a grandparent that comes in and is like, well, I just want to let you know that like I'm their guardian, that's not awarded to the state. It just means like the parent decided to take them. They have to be awarded to the state in order to be considered a foster parent. But we don't like ask for documentation on that. But if a parent talks to you about the situation and they're not awarded to the state, then that needs to go by the grandparent or the parent or whoever's their income or SNAP or TANF. Does that make sense? I know it's so weird doing this because I can't see. Okay, so if you have an income application, again, you list all the children that are enrolled, and then you put the names of all the household members. If someone in the household does not have income, there is a no income box, and that should be checked. I understand that a 1-year-old doesn't have a job, but USD for a while was very picky that they would like that to be checked. But if it is someone like especially working or that is of working age and then they are not working, then that no income box needs to be checked if it's no income. So what they'll do on the income is they'll list the income, and it's supposed to be the gross amount and how often they are getting paid. So on an income application, you have to have the household members, the kids enrolled, the income by gross. You also have to have the signature and the last 4 digits of the social security number. Or if they don't have a social security number, there's a box that they can check for none. But the application cannot be approved if it's an income application without the last 4 digits of the social, or unless that none box is checked. The income scale. So just make sure that when you're approving the application, the reduced scale is on the back of the The reduced scale is on the back of the application. You do not use that scale to approve the application. That's just on the application. It was required to be there, but you use in the back of the book under original documents is the income scale. And at the very top is the free amount and the very bottom is the reduced amount. So just make sure, we saw that quite a bit where people were using the back of the application as if they were free or reduced. So the only time you have to do an income conversion, so for instance, you have an application and you have 2 people that are working, and you have 1 person that gets paid monthly and you have 1 person that gets paid weekly. So if that's the case, then you have to take the application, you have to take the one that gets paid monthly and multiply it by 12, and the one that gets paid weekly and multiply it by 52 and add those together to get the annual conversion. And then you'll approve the application based on what it says annually. But say you have an application and you have 2 people that work in the household and they both work and they both get paid monthly. Then all you have to do is add the monthly up, and then you can approve it on the income scale using that monthly rate. It's only if people get paid in 2 different increments is when you have to do it annually. But you don't have to do that if they get paid the same rate. I'm trying to see. And a copy of that income scale, I'm just going to see if I can find that. It will be in institution or if you want to take a look at that, and it is, let's see here. Let me see, just so you guys know where it's located at. And it'll be around the same location for next year whenever you, we don't put it in the front of the book, we keep it in the institution originals. So just make sure you're using that income scale whenever you're approving your applications. And of course, I can't find it right now. So if you get an application that is not complete, it cannot be approved. It's considered not eligible, and you'll put them on the not eligible roster. So every child that is in attendance in your center needs to be on a roster. And so if they don't give you an application back, or if it's not completely done, and you've asked them for information and they haven't sent it back to you, then they have to go in the not eligible section. And again, an incomplete application is denied. If required information is missing, you can again ask them for it. You can ask the contact household, again, document the conversation. You can write anything on there if it has to do with like the SNAP number or anything like that. The one thing you can't do for them is sign it. So like if they miss signing the document, then you have to give it back to them to sign. And then you approve the applications at face value. So again, if there's no income reported, for any person where there's no income, they have to mark the no income box. They would be considered a free application if the parent signs it and puts the last 4 digits of their social security on there. But if they don't sign it or put the last 4 of their social, then it is not a no income. If they put an A on there, that usually means it's not applicable to them. So that does not mean it's a free application. It just means they didn't want to fill out the application because they don't qualify. We see that a lot in schools. And again, to approve an income application, it must contain an approved signature. Oh, at the very bottom of the application, there's a part that says for institution only, and that's what you fill out. That application is technically not approved until the center signs the application and tells us how you approved it. So if we come out and look at all your applications and you did not sign the bottom and date it and tell us how you approved it, free, reduced, paid, that information, then it's not an approved application either. So make sure you fill that bottom part out at the center. So we're going to have an effective date. It really, for childcare, it's not as big of an issue as it is for schools, but you have 2 ways that you can approve it, but you have to decide at the beginning how you're going to do this. You can't just flip flop and do it. When a parent signs and dates it, you can have the approval date as that date, or the approval date of the application is when you sign it and get to it. So for instance, say that a parent gives you an application on June 30th. And it's dated June 30th, but you're on vacation and you come back July 7th. Well, you can approve the application based on the date the parent, once you fill it out, once you fill the bottom out, you can say that the child was approved on the date that the parent signed it, or it's on the day that you sign it. So just make sure whenever your consultant comes out, if they ask that question, it's just consistent throughout. Most of the time, I think centers would do the date that the date the parent signs it. So we have some definitions, like determining household size, determining the household income, and any income exclusions. These are the page numbers in the training manual for those. Like determining household size, for instance, if you have a child, if a parent has a child that's in college, they can put them on the application even though they don't currently live at home. They're still technically part of the household because they're at college. Determining household income, there's questions on there, like for instance, if a person wins the lottery, it just defines all that information. So if you have any questions or some things that are just different, you don't know how to approve it, you can look here. If this still doesn't help you, then you can definitely call your consultant and they'll help. And again, we were talking about determining the household size, determining the household income, and income exclusion. So the rosters. So just make sure that you have 3 separate rosters. You have a free roster, a reduced roster, and a not eligible roster. And the not eligible rosters are the ones that either didn't turn in an application or the application was not completed. But every child that is in attendance in your center needs to be on a roster. So you have it on your regular roster. So every month when you list your children on the roster, you'll put the total number of free, the total number of reduced, and the total of not eligible, and that's what you put on the claim for participation. But an FYI, I've been to a couple centers in the past that they had, like, say, 2 children that were there, but they were never there during a meal service. They were in attendance, but again, like, I had one that they didn't do a snack, a PM snack. And these kids were there from 4 to 6. And so they were there in attendance, but they didn't eat. They still need to be on a roster. You don't have to get an application form, but they still have to be on a roster. But what you would do, instead of putting an X in the box that they participated that month, is you would put like an NP for not participating. But when we come out to the center to do a review, we make sure we take your attendance and we look at your roster to make sure they match. So it's okay if a child like never ate, but they were there or anything like that, but they need to still roster. So again, all of these forms that we're talking about, they all must be maintained daily by month at each center that are participating in CACFP. They also must be located on site. Whatever it says in your application is where they need to be. And it's usually the site of where your center is. We don't let you take them really off site. But we understand if like you have multiple centers and you have a central location that you keep them, but they need to stay on site. So we have the daily attendance record that's on page 55. If you can type into the chat box, how many meals do you guys serve per day that you claim? Do you serve 3 meals? Do you serve 4 meals? Or you can even type like breakfast, lunch, and PM snack, breakfast, lunch, supper. What meals do you guys do? 3, perfect. Perfect. Okay, good. So perfect. Okay. I won't go into the other one as much then, since that's what you guys do. So since you guys do 3 per day, all you guys are really required to do is keep attendance. Yes, they were here that day and participated in a meal, or no, they were not. As long as they participated in 1 meal, you can just put an X next to their name that they were there, which is perfect. And that is, I think it's on page, it says 55. And that's not the right page. We'll get that all straightened out. You can also do the meal count worksheet, which is on page 51 and 52. It's, yeah, 51 and 52 is the meal count worksheet. So on the attendance record, you just put yes or no that they were there, and then the meal count worksheet, you'll put like you served. On the example on page 52, it says like 19 breakfast, 16 lunch. You'll just put them all in there. And we have this form in the interactive worksheet. So if you don't want to have to do the math in case you get off, you can just enter your numbers in the Excel worksheet and it will add it for you at the end of the month, which is really, really nice. We have another form. I have some centers that do like to use this, but it's not required. It's called the DROMS form. And the DROMS form, it's one that it lists every meal, and you can just check mark. It serves as a attendance record and as a meal count worksheet. You can put like the child's name, but then mark that they ate breakfast, lunch, snack, however you want to do it. But for you guys, honestly, the easiest is just keeping attendance records that yes, the child was there that day, no, they weren't, that participated in a meal, and then the meal count worksheet when you're just putting the total number of meals served for that meal. So another form that's required is called the food purchasing form. This is the one that you take your receipts and you put them, you have to itemize them all onto that food purchasing form. This is the favorite form that everybody loves that we have interactive. But just make sure that so whatever your total receipt is at the bottom, say it's $55.05, that when you list everything on that food purchasing form, that it matches. And we have an example of the food purchasing form on page 56 of the training manual. So you have to break up the receipt into food and milk, to food related supplies, and then we have what's called non-reimbursable items. So just an FYI, if you've been on the program for a while, there's things that you can't serve now that you used to be able to serve. So if you serve things like cookies or anything like that, they have to be a non-reimbursable. You can't, if you serve anything as an extra that is not allowed on CACFP, you can't put it on the expenditure worksheet. That cost can't go towards the program. You can serve it as an extra, but you just have to back out the cost. I've had some people that did chicken nuggets and they did not have a CN label for it, so they just did it as an extra. They served cheese or they served pork and beans instead and a piece of bread. You have to take the chicken nuggets and put them in the non-reimbursable. You can't charge child nutrition for something that doesn't meet requirements. Okay. And at the end of the month, you'll take all of your food purchasing forms that's located on page 56, and then you'll put them all on your expenditure reimbursement worksheet. And there's one that's on number 61. So again, at the end of the month, you take all your receipts that you did a food purchasing form on, and then you'll list them on your expenditure reimbursement worksheet. The deal with the expenditures is we have to make sure you have to be what's called a nonprofit. So there's two things when we come out to do a review that we check. One, we check to see that you're financially viable, that you guys have, that as the center as a total, that you guys are for profit and you're not in the hole. That's one. But on the flip side of that, what we have to do is make sure the money that we're giving you for reimbursement, all of it plus some, is being spent on our program. So if we give you $1,000, say a month, you have to spend around $1,000 a month or more on the food program. So that's what this expenditure reimbursement worksheet tells us, is how you're spending their money, how much we're getting, how we're reimbursing you, and how much you're spending on our program. It's for our program only. And this is also where you can post some of your labor that you have. So it's between food costs and labor costs and non-food purchases that you can charge off to our program. And again, so you, on like say the labor, it can be like your cook's full salary, it can be your teachers when they help, but you can't charge off more than what you're actually doing. So if a teacher, you can't say a teacher spending 8 hours a day on our program because they're in the classroom with the kids, watching the kids. So they might be helping like an hour, hour and a half a day when it's at feeding time. Okay. So inventory. A monthly inventory is not required, but it's highly, highly suggested, especially the end of the month inventory. So when we're talking about receipts, we can only look at receipts from the current month. So if I come out to do a review for May and you say buy milk every Thursday, well, it happened to be Thursday is, let's say Thursday's June 1st. So you bought all this milk. Well, I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting it screwed up here. So say I'm looking at May and you buy milk every Thursday, and the last day of the month that for April was like April 30th and you bought milk that day. Well, I can't look at April receipts, but if you have an inventory, I can look at anything on the inventory for the next month. So say you bought 20 gallons of milk on April 30th and you carried over 15 gallons because you used 5 gallons that day, then you would put for April that you had 15 gallons of milk on the last day. And we can put that towards the milk for the next month. But we can't look at receipts. It's just something that USDA states, but we can look at any inventory you have and we can move it to the next month. You don't have to do it on your regular food that you purchase, but I do highly suggest it. I think it does keep a good track of what you're buying and what you're not using. I've also heard of a lot of instances in where it's a good way to keep track. I've been to centers before where they have, say, bought 20 pounds of hamburger, and then on the production record, say they used only 10 pounds, but they have no hamburger left. So what happened to that 10 pounds? If you put it on an inventory sheet, then you know you can move it forward to the next month. But it's just really all of your receipts, any inventory that you have, and your production records should all match. So say you bought, if you have no hamburger meat and you bought 20 pounds of hamburger for the month of June, you should have on your production records 20 pounds of hamburger. I've just heard of instances where food was kind of going out the back door. So. And again, receipts must be available for review purposes at all times. Receipts are a big one. And another thing with like milk and stuff, so if you are short on milk, we are required to take back every meal for that month of review that had milk in it. So if you served milk for every single meal, or if you served milk with just breakfast and lunch, then we take back every meal that had milk in it. So that's why we really suggest doing an end of the month milk inventory. Again, just the last day of the month, put the total number of gallons that you have left or total amount of milk that you have left in your fridge, and that can be carried over because you plan it, you're going to use it for the next month anyway. You're not going to let it go to waste, but we are able to look at it in the review purposes. So just make sure that you have that there. Something else with milk that I have seen before, if you are family style, the one thing to make sure of is when you serve milk, you have to make sure you dump it out at the end of the day or the end of the meal. You can't reuse milk, but what I have had happen that people do family style is with family style, all the required components are supposed to be in the bowl. Or supposed to be out there. The kids are not required to put it on their plate, but it is required to all be out there. I had a center once that they were like 50 gallons short of milk because what happened was they were doing family style and they had kids where they had to have 2 gallons of milk for the meal service. Well, what they did was the kids, because they were school age kids, were tired of milk because they got milk all day at school. They only drank 1 of the gallons. Well, the center was putting the other gallon back in the fridge and then reserving that. And you can't do it. We've already paid you for that. So those 2 gallons of milk, they need to do something else with it. What I suggested they do is just put a big O X mark on it, and they can use that milk for cooking. They can use that milk for like if teachers want something or as an extra. But you can't just reserve it because you have that extra gallon again. That was supposed to go towards the meal service. Since they didn't drink it, that was their choice that they didn't drink it, but it either needed to be dumped out or again, used for other purposes. So with milk, it can kind of be really tricky, but just make sure. So if you at lunch say you're supposed to serve a gallon of milk, that gallon of milk has to either be served, dumped, or depending on if you follow health code guidelines, like I said, with this situation, they had just put 2 gallons out there and they kept it on ice and they just put it back in the fridge, but they used it for cooking. They used it for other purposes. You cannot use it for the program again because that was already served and paid for in that previous meal. So I hope that makes sense. It gets sometimes a little confusing, but just make sure that you have a process so you're not getting in trouble with milk. So do we have any questions thus far? We're moving pretty quickly. It's so different doing this via Zoom, so we can usually read the room. And again, if you have any questions or anything that you want to talk about, feel free. So we'll go ahead and talk about the meal and the food component. So with CACFP, there are 5 food components. We have meat, we have grain, we have fruit, vegetable, and milk. And then you are required to offer the minimum serving size for a reimbursable meal. You can always serve more. You will never, ever get in trouble for serving more, but you cannot serve less than the required amount. So we now have technically 3 groups that we'll talk about. Is we have the 1 to 2-year-olds, 3 to 5-year-olds, and 6 to 12-year-olds. And since you guys don't do at-risk or adults, we won't talk about the others. So again, we have 1 to 2-year-old age group, 3 to 5, and 6 to 12. So we'll first talk about the grains component. So you must serve at least 1 serving of whole grain per day. It can be at any meal. It's not per child, it's just per day. So when we look at your production records, we have to know which item you served whole grain rich that day. Any other grain in that product must be enriched, or it can be with whole grain meal or flour or bran or germ. I had a lot of centers that they just chose, like basically every day for breakfast, they gave them wheat toast. It's just, or wheat bread. They just thought it was easy, just get out of the way at the breakfast time. But we can go over some things that all are whole grain. Oatmeal's whole grain automatically. Again, whole wheat toast is something a lot of people have done. There's some chips and some crackers out there that are whole grain. So again, just once per day, just make sure that you are serving something that is whole grain rich. Again, I had a lot of people just to be easy on themselves that they just did whole wheat toast 1 per day, just to make it easy on them and the kids would eat it. Again, there's pastas, there's almost anything you can think of, but you don't have to make it as hard, just 1 serving of whole grain per day. We do have a list, and you can even Google it, but you can serve, if you want to know some specific items that you can serve, you can do a WIC-Approved whole grain foods, and they'll pull up a list. They'll show breads, they have cereals, as long as it's labeled as whole wheat, and the FDA has a standard of identity. There is a health FDA whole grain claim that can be on there, but honestly, the easiest one is looking at the WIC-Approved whole grain food items. Or if you look at the ingredient list and the first or the second ingredient, so the first ingredient can say whole wheat or whole anything, whole corn, whole wheat, whatever it says, or it can say water and whole grain, whole wheat, anything like that. Those are the 2 easiest ways of getting a whole grain product. The reason this is really important, there are a couple things with USDA that have changed. So what will happen is say if you didn't serve something whole grain rich, we can take back, we'll be able to take back money for that. We'll take back the lowest meal that didn't have whole grain in it. So just a reminder that they're really serious with the whole grain, and just once per day. So here is a list that says WIC-Approved. So again, if you want to make it easier on you and just do WIC-Approved whole grain food list, makes it super easy. But again, if you see anything that says 100% whole on the product, then that counts. If it just says wheat, that doesn't mean it's whole wheat. But just look for the easiest is look for the 100% whole wheat on there. And again, these are some products with whole wheat. The breads, you can have whole wheat bread. If it says entire wheat, that's the same thing. Graham bread. So graham bread and graham crackers are the same, different things. Graham is a whole wheat. But if you look at some graham crackers, I think you can buy some that are whole wheat, whole grain. But graham has to be the first ingredient, and it's not. So that's why they're not 100%, but sometimes they'll say like whole wheat flour and then graham, and those do count. But graham is usually not the main ingredient in graham crackers. So I don't want anybody to get confused that graham crackers are automatically whole wheat, then you can have whole wheat buns and entire wheat buns, and again, graham buns. When we look at pastas, there's some whole wheat, but I see a lot of whole durum. So if you see anything with whole durum, anything that says whole in it, you're good to go. Make sure with when it comes to your bread items that you're using for your whole grain, your cereal boxes, and any yogurt that you're using, make sure you're saving a label, because the consultant will need to see, like if you're sitting here saying, yeah, I'm serving about whole wheat bread, they'll want to see what you're serving to make sure it does. Now, say you buy the same brand every time you go to the store, then you only need to save one package. Just save and put it like in a Ziploc baggie. Just when you're done with it, wipe it out, and then save that wrapper so that they have access to see that, making sure that what you're doing is whole grain. If you also have any questions, so all the consultants in the field have a work cell phone. That on page 4, those numbers in there are their work cell phones. I would have a lot of times whenever I was in the field that my centers would take a picture of the nutrition facts label and text it to me and ask me if it met requirements. I know they have no problem helping you out with that at all. So anytime if you're just not sure about something, but you really want to serve it, make sure that you reach out to your consultant. Again, take your phone with you, take a picture of it and send it to them. So again, here's an example of a product. If you look at a product and look at the ingredient label, it says whole wheat flour as the first ingredient. So this item would be considered a whole grain item. So this would count for that one whole grain that day. And again, since the first ingredient was whole grain and the rest were enriched, then that is a whole grain item. Now we're going to talk a little bit about breakfast cereal. We have a form out on the resource library as well that talks about this. So sugar is a big thing now. So sugar in yogurt and sugar in cereals. They must stay under 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce. And you can also no longer do any grace-based desserts. And we'll kind of talk about that. The easiest thing to do with breakfast cereal is I suggest you use the WIC. WIC has approved cereals. All those cereals on the WIC approved meet. Again, we do have a chart in the resource library. And in that chart, so for instance, you get a box of cereal and it will tell you that there's one serving is say 1.5 ounces. And then it lists on there in the nutrition facts label, say it says like 9 on the ounces of grams of sugar. You'll use that chart to see if it meets, unless you use the WIC-Approved chart. If you use the WIC-Approved cereals, you're fine. You can use any on that. You don't have to do the math yourself to make sure that the cereal does meet. But again, it must be one that it's 6 grams of total sugar per dry ounce. Cheerios is on that list, I know. Last I knew, like Honey Nut Cheerios does not count. It has too much sugar on it. There's some cereals that surprised me that were very close to meeting. And I wouldn't be surprised if that you just keep checking periodically, because if they say lower in sugar, it may now meet the requirements. But like I've had a lot of people that just have used that WIC-Approved list. I know Kix is on that list. I'm trying to think. Multigrain Cheerios, people for the ones that they wanted more sugar like that met the requirements, but that were a little bit more sugary. Frosted Shredded Wheats was on that list. So those are the approved cereals that you can do that meet the sugar requirements. I know Becky's on here. Is there any other cereals that you can think of or wants to be aware of that don't meet? Like for a long time, I thought the Cheerios, Honey Nut Cheerios met, and they do not meet the requirements. They have too much sugar. I remember Alphabets being on that list. So again, there's some things on there that will kind of surprise you, and then there's some things that you're kind of surprised they're not on there. And here is the website that we have for that. But again, if you just Google WIC-Approved, breakfast cereals, it will give you like, it's a 2 or 3 page list. It looks like we're having a couple duplicate sides. Again, here they are. Like I remember, yeah, mini shredder or mini spooners are on there. It has some name brands, and it also has those that are, some of them like frosted, I can't read that up there, but it is a different brand, like Happy O's, Corn Crisp. So again, I know the Kicks are all on there. This is a really, really good resource to use for that. I even see Target brand is on here. It also applies to hot cereals as well. We have had the question posed is what if we add like say sugar and cinnamon to oatmeal? Technically, yes, you can do that, but we just say, please, you know, do it sparingly, or maybe not as much as you used to do, because sugar has just been a really hot button with USDA. So we'll talk a little bit about grain-based desserts. So again, sugars are a really big thing for USDA. It is no longer allowed to serve cookies. It's no longer allowed to do donuts. At one point in time, they actually had graham crackers, or they had animal crackers on there. So they did put them back on, but that's why we're saying do things sparingly, because we don't want them to take some of this stuff back off of the list. Again, if it's not accreditable towards the grain component, you can still serve it if you want, but you can't have it on your receipt. You have to mark it off and put it in a non-reimbursable on your expenditure worksheet. There was a center that when this first came out, they had been a center for 20 years. And every Friday they did donuts. And she's like, she didn't know what to do. So here's your options if you still want to continue doing anything like that. But so you can either one, not claim the meal. So you can serve the donuts and just not claim it. If you have any meals and you don't claim them, then we don't care what you serve. We don't look at it if you don't claim it. But what this center chose to do is they did a donut, and then they served the fruit and milk that were required at breakfast. And then they also served like a yogurt. The yogurt was but the donut was just an extra. But they just didn't want to take that away from the kids because they really love Donut Fridays. And I understand. So again, you still can do that. I mean, you can still serve it as an extra, but just make sure that you don't list it as something that's reimbursable, because it's not. So here is a part of some of the grain-based desserts. Toaster pastries like Pop-Tarts, cakes, brownies, cookies, donuts, granola bars. You can do granola cereal, but you cannot do granola bars. A sweet roll, like a cinnamon roll, breakfast bars, and the cereal bars. So just here again is the list. If something looks questionable that you're not sure if it meets or not, I would definitely take a picture of it, contact your consultant to see if it's allowed or if it's not allowed. That's the best way. And there are going to be products in general that you just don't know if it's allowed or not. So we have no problem. We'd rather you ask us before the review than before we come out and do a review. I promise you, we do not like reviews. Are actually, it's a lot of our job, but it is not one of our favorite parts of the job. We don't like writing people up. So I'm just telling you, we would rather you tell us at the beginning, like, hey, can I serve this, than us come out and then have to take a whole meal back and take reimbursement back from you because it wasn't supposed to be served. And some foods are not easily identifiable as a grain-based dessert, but like if a cookie is labeled as a breakfast round, and we've seen this, and it looks like a cookie, we're like, please don't, like, I wouldn't serve it. If it looks like a cookie, I would stay away from it, even though they call it a breakfast round. Something else, you can serve as muffins, and we get this question posed a lot. You can serve a muffin, and I know that we think that USD mostly means like a quick bread muffin, like banana bread, zucchini bread, or a carrot muffin. I do know when you buy the big deals of Otis Spunkmeyer at Sam's, a lot of times it'll be zucchini, banana. I can't remember if carrots in there, and then chocolate chip. Yes, you can technically serve it because it is a muffin and muffins are allowed. But we just say if you had a choice of buying a variety like that or just buying the chocolate chip by itself, we would say probably please maybe steer away from doing the chocolate chip by itself. Because we understand, like I said, USDA, they took animal crackers away for a while. So, and I think graham crackers, if I can remember right, but we just don't want them to take any more stuff like this away. So if you can keep it more of a quick bread, that's perfect. But technically, yes, you can serve a chocolate chip muffin. Again, we had a lot of centers that used to do like once a month for snack. They would do, say, a birthday bash, and they would serve cupcakes and juice as a reimbursable meal. You can still, again, do those, but again, you cannot claim the cupcake. And then if you want, you can either not claim the snack or whatever the meal is, or you can still serve it, but serve everything else with it that would make it a reimbursable meal. So say you did a cupcake and maybe animal crackers and milk. But again, that item that doesn't count has to be taken off of the expenditure worksheet and put in the non-reimbursable section of the food purchasing form. So again, just to review labels and your menus and information. So make sure, again, once per day, you're serving something whole grain rich. And again, when a whole grain food is not served, the meal or snack containing a grain with the lowest reimbursement will be disallowed. So if there's no whole grain food that was served, and say you served a grain for breakfast, lunch, and snack that day, then we would disallow the snack. So there is actually money tied to not serving something whole grain rich. And like I said, I've seen Cheez-Its that are whole grain or Goldfish crackers that are whole grain. But again, I have some that just want to make it easy on themselves, and they just choose to do toast every day for breakfast, and to make sure that they get that whole grain in. So for breakfast, you 3 days a week, you can substitute your grain item for a meat item. So an example of this is, say, instead of doing cereal, milk, and fruit, you can do eggs, milk, and fruit instead. A lot of times, again, I see a lot of people that still do add like a toast or something, but you can do a yogurt, you can do eggs, you can do that 3 times a week. You can substitute the grain for a meat at breakfast. Yogurt is a great one. You do have to watch the sugar in that. And then tofu also now credits as a meat alternate. I don't know of a lot that do tofu in Oklahoma, but you can serve tofu. Some other meat alternates are nuts and seeds. Peanut butter is a great one. Just a reminder that 2 tablespoons of peanut butter equals 1 ounce of meat alternate. So if a lot of times this is a great for snack. If I don't know if you guys are peanut free now, but this is great for snack, because if you need 2 ounces of meat, you're talking 4 tablespoons of peanut butter, and that's 1/4 of a cup. It's a lot of peanut butter. So again, 2 tablespoons equal 1 ounce of meat. 1 large egg equals 2 ounces of meat. And then you have your beans, yogurt. 4 ounces of yogurt equals 1 ounce. So like a Go-Gurt, one of those is 1 ounce of meat. And then natural cheese is 1 ounce for 1 ounce. Something that we see periodically is when you're serving cheese, some of the cheeses that are not allowable. So you cannot serve imitation cheese, cheese food, cheese product. And if you can see here in this, it didn't get covered very well, but in this, it says pasteurized prepared cheese product. It's what's in the yellow box. That says cheese product, therefore cheese product is not allowed. So this would not count. You couldn't serve this to count towards any cheese or for your meat for that day. Kind of a word to the wise, if you buy cheese, sliced cheese, most of the time, if it is individually wrapped, it doesn't meet requirements. It's a cheese product. But if it's usually, you can buy like a big old 5-pound block of sliced cheese that's not individually wrapped, that usually does meet. So again, just make sure when you're looking at your cheese items, if it says cheese product, it does not meet. Velveeta is a cheese product. It does not meet. A cheese food, I've only seen one time. I happened to be at Sam's and I saw it. It was a dip. So it's not that someone would serve it at their center, but if you have a cheese food, you have to serve 2 ounces to equal 1 ounce of meat alternate. So cream cheese does not count on our program. So again, just make sure if it says imitation or cheese product, it does not count. So yogurt, again, we have to deal with the yogurt. We have a great chart. One of my favorite charts is the yogurt chart, and it is out on the resource library. No more than 23 grams of total sugar per 6 ounces. Now, some of you might buy yogurt in the big tubs. If you go and look at that, that yogurt chart, I'll get better at doing these Zoom meetings and looking at the charts. I don't have it to where let me see. Let me actually see if I can grab this really quickly and show you a copy of one. Let's see. Oh, okay, let me see if I have one that I can show you. Sources. I think I have one someplace, but I really highly suggest, let's see. I am not seeing it. I need to download one, but it's a really great chart. It's in blue, and it will show you like, it will say like if it's 6 ounces, it can have 23 grams of sugar. If it has like 4 ounces, it can have like 19 grams of sugar. It's a great chart. So no matter how you buying it, if you look at the label to let you know how much sugar is in there. Now, USDA did say that you cannot buy like say yogurt that goes over the sugar requirements and a plain yogurt and mix them together. That's not allowed. USDA said no, it has to be the product that you're buying. Something that I have seen, and Becky, you let me know if it has changed because it's been a while since I've been in the field, that when I was in the field, Go-Gurt did meet requirements. You could serve Go-Gurt. But what the deal was is I told people to save the box because they bought it from Sam's, and on the front of the box it said 2 ounces, or I think it said 2 or 4 ounces of yogurt. But then when you looked at the package on the back, it did like in grams. Well, when you looked at the grams, it looked like it didn't meet the requirements. But when you look at the ounces did meet the sugar requirements. And we looked at USDA, and USDA said that ounces trump grams if it is on there. So again, if you have any yogurt that you're serving and you just are not quite sure it meets the sugar requirements, if you just text a copy of the label and to your consultant, they are more than welcome to help you with that.
Kendra?
Yeah.
I do know it can't be like the frozen
Yes.
yogurt, so want to be careful with that. And they could always reference the food buying guide. I think it gives some further guidelines on the yogurt.
And Yoplait, it seems like a lot of the Yoplait yogurts tend to meet. And she is correct too. Even if you say you buy like Go-Gurt, you can't, it's weird. USDA does not want you freezing it. You have to give it to them in yogurt form, not frozen form. And it does not mean like frozen yogurt ice cream. It means like the actual yogurt that you buy in the refrigerated section. Because we have had people that have bought ice cream thinking that's what they were talking about. So here's an example. Like if you look here, it says in a 6-ounce serving of this yogurt, it has 19 grams of sugar. So does this meet? Because they are only allowed to have 23 grams of sugar per 6 ounces. So if you look at this label, this here does meet the sugar requirements for yogurt. And again, here's kind of what the list looks like. It's also, again, on our resource library. This upcoming year, we are planning on putting that into our manual. It was just a form that we have separately, and it's been driving me crazy. So we're going to put that in into our manuals, so that way we have a list of what that says, because it's a great little chart. It has it to where even if you buy, like I said, the tubs, it will let you know if you buy that whole tub, if it meets requirements or not. Okay, the vegetable and fruit component. So they separated fruits and vegetables, except at breakfast. It's intermingling, or you can do one or the other at breakfast. You are now only allowed to do juice once per day. And a vegetable can replace, and you can also replace the vegetable for the fruit at lunch or supper. So an example of that is, say you are serving, that day you're gonna do like, or chicken nuggets is a popular one. So say you're doing chicken nuggets, and schools would do mashed potatoes and green beans, but they wouldn't serve a fruit. You can do that. The only thing you can't do is, for instance, if say you're doing French fries, you can't just say, I'm gonna give them 3/4 cup of French fries total. It has to be 2 separate different vegetables. It can't be like mashed potatoes and French fries or all French fries. It has to be 2 different types of vegetables. So if you do serve juice, it has to be 100% juice. Juice blends and juice purees that contribute to the food component, like a fruit or vegetable, that is the most prominent. So I have not really seen anybody buy them, but say for instance you bought the V8 juices, and some of them have vegetable in it. If the vegetable is the first ingredient, it's considered a vegetable. If the fruit's the first ingredient, it's considered a fruit. But regardless if it's a fruit or a vegetable juice, you can only do it once per day. Also with the juice, just kind of a suggestion, I would say. With juice, if you have a lot of just my suggestion is, if you're gonna do juice, I would suggest you probably do juice at snack. And the reason why is because their fruit, or the fruit and vegetable requirement, is much higher at snack than it is for breakfast. So say you have a child that's over 6 years old and you're going to do bananas, at breakfast they only need 1 banana, but if you serve that same banana at snack, they need 1.5 bananas. So my suggestion, if you do a juice, you may want to do it at snack, because the serving requirement is much higher. Also, just a rule of thumb, we saw this quite a bit. You would refer to the food buying guide, but 1 average size banana equals 1/2 cup, and 1 average size orange equals 1/2 cup. Not the mandarin, the normal size oranges. So some people think that they are worth more, and I understand that. Now, if you're cutting it up and putting it in a cup, then yes, if it yields more. But if you're just handing out bananas, a normal average banana is only 1/2 cup. Now, a medium-sized apple equals a full cup, so per the food buying guide. But just to give you a little hint or a heads up about what those are determined when we're out doing a review. 1 cup of raw leafy greens. So if you're serving a salad that day, if you serve 1 cup of raw leafy greens, then it equals a 1/2 cup of vegetable. It's just because it's so fluffy. Like, have you ever taken fluffy spinach, raw spinach, and microwaved it? It like microwaves down to nothing. So just a quick rule of thumb, 1 cup of raw leafy greens equals a 1/2 cup of vegetable. And it's the opposite if you do anything dried, like if you do dried raisins or cranberries or plum or prunes, it doubles in size. So in this case, if you serve 1/4 cup of dried fruit, it equals a 1/2 cup of fruit. So maybe at breakfast, you're serving oatmeal with raisins and milk. The dried fruit would count as your fruit, but it doubles in size. So if you say give them 1/4 cup of dried fruit, then that equals a 1/2 cup. And kids are funny about raisins. I've been to schools where kids cry if you give them raisins, and then I've been to some schools that they cry if you don't give them raisins. So raisins are a weird one. Either they love them or they hate them. And I know it's probably per age too. I mean, I know the thing is with DHS, like for instance, on our program, a hot dog is you can serve an all beef hot dog. An all beef hot dog with no C on label can be served on our program. Now people ask us, can it be a 1-year-old? Well, on our program, yes, it can. However, some stuff you have to go through DHS because they dictate like the appropriate age for the appropriate thing. Like I know chips are not appropriate for anybody under 2. So if it's something credible in our program, we say you can, just because it's a credible item, but also listen to DHS about when you can feed them the certain food groups, the certain items. So milk, fluid milk from age when they're 1, between the time they turn 1 and the time they turn 2, they have to have whole milk, unless you have a doctor's note, but they have to have whole milk. Ages 2 to 5 can have unflavored skim or 1% milk. And then anybody 6 years and up can have 1% or skim, flavored or unflavored milk. But you do have to have, the 1-year-olds have to have whole milk. And then there is a 1 month, what do they call it, transition. So say they turn 1 in June, say June 4th, they have until until July 5th or July 4th, July 5th, they can have like whole milk, they can have like 2% milk. You can do a transition month right there. But it used to be you could serve them whatever, but it was recommended for whole milk. But now they must get whole milk at 1 year of age. Okay, here are the sizes. For most of the meals, it's 4, 6, and 8. And to be honest, it's just, I would always just do 4, 6, and 8, 4, 6, and 8. At snack, it's 4, 4, and 8. But again, to be safe, I just would always do 4, 6, and 8. It's just kind of easy to remember for these age groups. So a 1/2 cup for 1-year-olds, 1 and 2s, 3 to 5s get 3/4 of a cup, and a 6-year-old gets 8 ounces, 1 cup. If you're measuring it out, what I suggest is use a liquid measuring cup, like the one pictured on the screen, the liquid. The one that's X'd out is a dry measuring. So dry measurements and liquid measurements are 2 different things. We did an experiment that we used to do. If you take the 1 cup dry ounce and pour it in a cup, it's less. So if you use a dry measuring cup and you're serving milk using a dry measuring cup, you're going to be short on milk because it's not the same as liquid. Liquid has more in it. And you can do the experiment yourself. It's about not an ounce short, but it's short. So if you did that for every meal service for every month, you're going to be short on milk. Something else I would highly suggest is if you are serving milk to the older kids, the 1 cup of milk, and you're buying an 8.5 ounce cup, I would definitely get a larger cup, because you have to serve that to the very brim, the top brim, for it to get 8 ounces. Not the bottom one, but the top one. So, and most people are not doing that. So I've seen people short on milk for not serving the right cup size. So if you have older kids, make sure you're buying at least either the plastic 9 ounce or a larger styrofoam cup, because that has gotten people in trouble before with milk. So if you're going to measure it, make sure you use a liquid measuring, or make sure you're buying the right size cup. Are there any questions about that? Or Becky, is there anything that you've seen too with the milk to be cautious of? All right. So again, we talked about that 1 month transition period, which is allowed to switch from whole milk to low fat or fat free. Again, children 24 months to 25 months may be served, again, whole milk, 2% milk, or you can go ahead and do the skim or 1% milk. Either way, but they do have a transition period. So the milk substitution. A substitution may allow parents to request a milk substitution. There's a form in our book. To be honest, we have a lot of daycares that don't participate in this. What this means is that you are telling your parents, you would let them know, I serve a milk substitute, and you're telling them what the milk substitute is. The only ones that are permissible right now on USDA's list is a soy milk, and it has to meet certain criteria. So like silk doesn't meet the requirements. It's like 8th Continent was one, Pacific was one. I know Walmart Great Value brand was one. But if you do the milk substitute, a medical statement is not required to do the milk substitute. But they do have to have the request, it must be made in writing, and that the offering the milk substitute is an option, and the center has to pay for the milk to do the milk substitute. I just don't know if any centers that are really doing this milk substitute. If you are doing the milk substitute, if you'd just let me know, I'm curious. And then also if, does anybody do family style, or are you guys straight serve? I'm curious about that.
Kendra?
Yeah.
One thing on the milk is when they're making substitutions, then record that on their menus as served as well.
Yes.
Short on milk.
Yes, definitely. Definitely list any milk of anything. Make sure that you do list if you're serving an additional type of milk. And again, with the milk, it can be very tricky. So if you're not sure if it meets or not, I would also have your consultant check that out. Like silk, we talked about, doesn't meet. Almond milks don't meet. Coconut milk doesn't meet. The only ones that meet thus far is the soy milks. Now, if you have a note from a doctor that says specifically serve silk, or if you have a note from a doctor that specifically says, almond milk, then you do what the doctor's note says. But if you don't have anything like that, then what they're getting must be a creditable item. Again, the parent on that request form has to put the reason, and it can't be because the child doesn't like milk. And in my personal opinion is, if a kid's not gonna drink milk, I just don't know why they would actually drink soy milk. But I like milk, so that's why I say that too. But that form also has to be completed and signed by a parent. But these are the nutrient requirements. And the one that we see the most is the fact that the protein doesn't meet the 8 grams of protein. But I did have somebody send me, what was it? I think it was an almond milk, but it was kind of fortified, but it still did not meet requirements, because I think it had like 200 IUs of vitamin A, or maybe like 50 IUs of vitamin D. It did not meet these requirements. So all these have to be met. But the one to quickly see if it does meet is by looking at the protein. If the protein doesn't meet, then the rest of it's obviously not going to meet as well, but or it just won't qualify. But that's just the easiest one to look at. But if you have a question and say the protein is over that, again, let us know and we'll take a look at it to make sure to see if it meets or not. So a medical statement is required when a disability requires a non-dairy beverage that is not nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk. And that's what we were talking about. Like, you have to have a doctor's note if you serve, like, if the parent wants almond milk or anything like that, we have to have a doctor's note that says that the child has to have, say, almond milk. They can't have anything else. A doctor's note trumps anything. So and a medical statement. So it's required for participants who are unable to consume certain foods. It must be signed by a recognized medical authority. So someone that can write like a prescription, like it can't be like a dentist. It has to be like a doctor that would look at, you know, that this is an allergy or whatever it is. It should include a recommended alternate food, which we would love to see. That doesn't always happen. It cannot claim meals lacking required components, quantities, unless the meal is supported by a medical statement. So an example is we were talking about milk. It should at least have, you should substitute it. So if they say the parent, if they say no soy or no cow's milk, and so you do almond milk, you can claim it, but you have to still have the almond milk out there. And then you may make non-medical substitutions with documentation, not including milk. So an example of that would be, say, I am allergic to strawberries, or I get a rash when I have strawberries, or I mean, I know it's allergic reaction, but let's just say strawberries or something I have. If you want to substitute it for like oranges, I wouldn't get too upset that you didn't have a medical statement because you're serving a like-minded thing and it still meets requirements. Becky, do you have anything to add on the whole medical statement with foods? Let's see here. Oops, we're losing you, Becky. You're little, we kind of can hear you, we kind of can't.
I don't think I have anything.
Okay, there we go. We heard you. Awesome. So now we're going to talk about meal patterns. Again, on the breakfast, lunch, supper, and snack, you must follow the minimum meal pattern requirement. Again, you can serve more, you just can't serve less. And again, I don't have handouts, but again, it is on the resource library. All the meal patterns are also located in the training manual that you should have, or again, that's located in the resource management. And then training must cover the meal patterns. And because you do have to do training is required that you do for your staff. So that is a required thing that you train on. So for breakfast, we have 3 components. We have milk, fruit, vegetable, or both, and a grain. And again, the meat served in place of a grain, you can do that 3 times a week. So I gave the example earlier, a meat for a grain is, you can serve 1 ounce of meat per 1 serving of grain. So again, you can substitute like your 1 ounce serving, or your whatever your serving size is, you can change it for 1 ounce of meat. So you could do an egg instead. And here are the meal pattern requirements. So if you look here, you see for breakfast, for ages 1 to 2, they have to have a 1/2 cup of milk, 1/4 of a cup total of either vegetable or fruit or both. And then depending on what you serve them, they have to have 1 serving of a grain. And we'll go over a grains chart too, so if you're buying anything of what they have to have. But a lot of times if you're doing a bread, it's a 1/2 slice is their requirement serving. Ages 3 to 5, it's 6 ounces or 3/4 cup of milk. a half of a cup of fruit, vegetable, or both. And then also they are also a half of a serving is what they call it, half of a grain serving. And then 6 through 12 is 1 cup of milk, a half a cup of fruit and vegetable or both, and then 1 serving of grain. So a lot of times if you're doing toast, it's going to be 1 piece of toast. And again, you can always serve more, you just cannot serve less. So at lunch we have 5. All 5 of these have to be served. So milk, vegetable, fruit, grain, and meat alternative. Again, all 5 components must be served for a reimbursable meal. So these meal patterns are ages 1 to 2, again, 4 ounces of fluids, a half a cup of milk, 1 ounce of meat, and then we'll go ahead and do the other one since we're seeing this page. Age 3 to 5, 3/4 cup of milk, and then 1.5 ounces of meat. And depending on what that meat item is dependent upon how much you have to serve. So you can see here, like it's 1 ounce of meat, cooked meat, or 4 ounces of yogurt. They equal the same amount. And that's what the food buying guide tells you. So if you don't have a copy of the food buying guide, you can also download an app, and we'll talk about the food buying guide. But that's what tells you how much to credit. And that's the same thing that it tells you 2 tablespoons of peanut butter equal 1 ounce of meat. So depending on what it is determined upon how much is in there. Again, for like ages 3 to 5 for lunch, they need 1.5 ounces, or say 3 tablespoons of peanut butter, or 6 ounces of yogurt. And then 6 through 12, they need a full cup of milk, and then 2 full ounces of meat alternate. Now, what I've had some centers do also, because you can always feed more, is I've had a lot that have done like the 1 ounces for the 1 to 2 year olds, but then they serve 2 ounces of meat from ages 3 to 12, just to make it easier on the center. So again, as long as you're serving more food, you can do that. We don't get mad about more food. We just have to take back meals when you serve less than the required amount. So if you want to make it easy, just do 1 ounce of meat for the 1 to 2 year olds, and then do 2 ounces of meat for the 3 through 12 year olds. So at snack, and it didn't get through the other ones with the fruit or the vegetable. So with the vegetable and fruit at lunch, it's a fourth of a cup of fruit. No, it's 1/8 of a cup of fruit and 1/8 of a cup of vegetable, I believe, for lunch for the 1 to 2 year olds. And then it's a 1/4 of a cup. Let's see here. Let me get my book out and look at the statement. But again, at lunch, you are more than welcome to also change. You can substitute the fruit for a vegetable. A lot of them you don't do that, which is fine. You don't have to. But if you ever want to substitute, you can do vegetable instead. So the vegetable it goes 1/8 of a cup for the 1 to 2 year olds, a 1/4 of a cup for the 3 to 5 year olds, and a 1/2 of a cup of vegetable for the 6 through 12. And then for fruit, it's 1/8 of a cup of fruit and a 1/4 of a cup of fruit for everybody older than that. So ages 3 to 5 and 6 to 12, just to give you an idea. But again, it is split up between 2 components now. And, but you can substitute a fruit for a vegetable, but you cannot substitute a vegetable for a fruit. So at snack, you're only required to serve 2 out of the 5 components. So you can serve a milk, grain, meat, fruit, or vegetable. You only have to serve 2 out of the 5. You can serve more than that, but you only have to serve the 2. And this gives you an idea about what the meal pattern is. And these meal patterns are located on page 130. So, like the vegetable and the fruit component, for the 1 to 2 year olds, it's a 1/2 of a cup. The 3 to 5 year olds is a 1/2 of a cup, and ages 6 to 12 is a 3/4 cup. So if you serve, say, apple juice and carrots, you have to serve them both in 3/4 cup to the older kids and a 1/2 a cup from ages 1 to 2 and 3 to 5. But any two combinations that you want to do, you can serve at snack. Look at the food buying guide, but something that has been added that you can serve is popcorn. Just FYI, that's a new one. Popcorn's new, but you can now serve popcorn. I'm trying to think of anything else that may be new. Because a lot of people, seems like they always want snack ideas. So other things is, how do you credit some of these food items? Some of them will look in the food buying guide to see how much you credit. For instance, we were talking about the peanut butter. 2 tablespoons of peanut butter equal 1 ounce of meat. If you have things that are mixed, like a chicken nugget, a burrito, a corn dog, fish sticks, anything that is a breaded meat or anything that's like breaded, that's a combination of 2 components put together, you have to have a product formulation statement and or a CN label. And I'll tell you right now, it's very hard to get a formulation statement. So a formulation statement, you have to go directly to the manufacturer, or not to the vendor, but the manufacturer. So if it's Tyson that makes this chicken nugget that you want a product formulation statement on, you have to go to Tyson to get this information. A CN label will be on the box. Becky, is Sam's carrying or anything like that any CN label items that you're aware of at this time? I know they were at one time, but are they still? Or did they stop doing that in your area?
The question was, does Sam still have some CN labels?
Yeah.
I think it's very limited. There are a few products that.
Okay. Because they did, and then for several years they didn't. And then
Right.
I knew that they had like chicken nuggets and I think fish sticks were the only 2 that I were aware of. But I didn't know if they pulled them again, because I've heard some people call and say they can't find them again. So I didn't know if they're
Yeah,
still.
it's pretty sparse. So
Okay.
I really haven't heard this year anybody talking about it.
Yeah, I haven't seen the chicken nuggets in probably the last 2 to 3 months, I would say.
Okay, I've heard that. We had someone call up here right before COVID happened and they couldn't find it. So they may not have them right now, but it's the best that you can. I mean, unless you use a vendor, it sounds like Sam's is going to be spotty for a while with the CN labeled products. But here's again, if it's a mixed dish, and these are anything that are pre-bought, that are pre-made. Now you can make them. Like I had one center when you couldn't find any CN labeled products. She used to make burritos all the time, bean burritos. And she actually said, she's like, I can't find them. What am I supposed to do? And I'm like, just make your own. Just get tortillas, put refried beans in there, some cheese, and like bake it. And so she even did one better. She got her dried beans and cooked them all day and then put them in a burrito and with cheese and baked them. And I go, how'd it go? She goes, well, it's cheaper, but she also said the kids are eating them up left and right. She goes, the kids, it's one of their favorite meals that she now does when she made it homemade versus doing it pre-bought, which I understand some things are easier, but for instance, like chicken nuggets and stuff and fish sticks. But if you buy like shake and bake and just put some chicken tenderloins in a Ziploc baggie and shake it up, you can tell us how much chicken was in there. The breading really won't count, but you can just give them a piece of bread. But if you still want to give them some of the things that they used to like or used to eat all the time, you can still do it, but you can just make it homemade. Pizza is another one. You can buy a pre-made pizza crust and then just put your own toppings on it. Or people that do the whole, like the biscuit, make that as your crust. But it's only if you're buying it, a pre-made pizza, if you're buying a corn dog, those are the items that you do have to have a CN label. Another idea, if you want to make something homemade, is getting crescent rolls or a biscuit and instead of doing a corn dog, you can make pig in a blanket. So, but if it is something that is 2 components put together, you have to have a CN label because you don't know how much to serve. You don't know how much meat is in it. We don't know how much bread is in it unless you have the CN label. And make sure you keep your CN labels as well, because we will take a look at those when we come out to do your review. So just kind of some tricks. And this was, I believe, the maker's mark, or the maker's, whatever Walmart brand is. I knew it was coming into a box. And this is what their CN label looked like. So if you look on this box next to that whole grain stamp to the left, it says 5 chicken nuggets. That's a CN label. That's what that is. So just make sure you cut that off. This person did the whole box, the top of the box, and just keep it, which we suggest.
That's the one from Sam's.
Yeah, yeah. Which I'm surprised. I mean, I was really glad to hear that Sam's brand was doing their own chicken nuggets instead of going through Tyson and stuff. But I thought they would do more. But I think right now, I know it's just been crazy times with the fact of COVID. So that may be why they pulled it right now, is just because they're trying to feed the masses. Again, this is another one, another CN label. This one's a Crispito. This one I can tell came from a vendor. So then the corn dog, this one came from a vendor, but you can see that what the CN label looks like on the box. If it's not on the box, then the product doesn't have a CN label. So again, it has to be the original CN label from the box. You can also take a picture of it, but it has to be very legible. Yeah, like this says, must be visible and legible. But a lot of people I knew would just cut off the box and just keep a copy of the box, that box lid. But I would tell you too, if you check periodically to make sure the CN label that you have matches the number, because the CN labels now expire, but they may change the CN number on you. And if it happens, then make sure you cut off that box. But I would surely every year just throw away your old CN labels and then get new ones every year, just to be on the safe side that you have the most current ones. So a watermark CN label, this is really only if you're using a vendor can you do this. But sometimes when you use a vendor, like the box gets thrown away and all that kind of stuff, and you can't find the CN label. What this is if you call your vendor, like Cisco, Benny Keith, Tankersley, Mid-America, any of those, and call and be like, I need a CN label, then they'll send you one, but it will have this mark on it. We call it a watermark, and it basically means that this did not come from the box. It's an electronic copy of a CN label. We will accept that only if you give us an invoice that shows us that you paid for that exact same item. And I think we have this is an example of one. Where is it at? So you'll see the CN label, but underneath where it says net weight 18.13 pounds, underneath that it says sample copy not for documentation or documenting federal mill requirements. So it basically tells us that this is not a valid CN label unless you have a copy of your invoice showing us that you bought this exact same item. I think we have we don't have another one. Sometimes it's where it says in that little, you see that 69190 underneath that, it has that shield. Sometimes that will be marked out. It will have a big X over it. But again, if one that comes electronic, it will say basically that it's electronic by saying that, and then we can't accept it unless we have an invoice showing where it was paid for, that exact item. There's a product out there, and I'll tell you too. Okay, so companies have to pay a lot of money to put the child nutrition facts label, put the CN label on there. So you could go to Walmart or to Sam's. I'll use Tyson as an example. You could see 2 chicken nuggets. Let's use the Dino nuggets. You could see 2 bags of Dino nuggets, same size, same packaging, same everything, except one's like $1 more. Well, if you really inspect the packages, one probably has a CN label, one probably does not. CN label products are going to cost a little bit more because they have to get something from USDA and they have to pay money to have that put on there, that label. So they usually charge more for it. And anytime they change one ingredient, they do anything and alter that recipe, then they have to get a new CN label. And that's why some don't, because they don't go back through the process of getting a CN label on it. Well, sometimes you'll see a product, especially some of the cheaper products, that says this product is approved for child nutrition programs. And I've even seen it where it says click link here for details. People will buy that product thinking that's a CN label, and it's not. So I just don't want you to be fooled. There's one brand in particular that used to do this, and we even clicked on the link. We typed in the link, and it was just basically all it was all their products that they sold. So it has to be that CN where it says CN around it, has the 6-digit number. This again is not a CN label, and if it's not approved. So again, with the product formulation statement, I won't spend a whole lot of time on this. It has to be on company letterhead. Like, so we were talking about, say, Tyson chicken nugget. It has to come from the manufacturer. It has to be signed by them. They have to use the food buying guide to determine the amounts. Half of these are, and even from Tyson, I have seen 50% of them wrong. I've seen 50% of them right. I tell people before they use the product and they get a product formulation statement, I would definitely have your consultant or send it up here and we'll take a look at it. Even from like I said, good companies, we've seen them where some of them are right and some of them are wrong. It has to be signed by them, and a lot of times they're like 4 or 5 pages long. So just make sure to maintain labels for your yogurt, your whole grain items, and your breakfast cereals. And honestly, with your breakfast cereal, you can just cut out the side panel. And it usually, because what we need for the cereal, for your nutrition facts label, we have to make sure, one, we have to see the ingredient list in case those are your whole grain items. We have to see the nutrition facts label to make sure the sugar count is correct. And then usually at the top of that nutrition facts label, it will tell you the name of the item. So if you can do that side panel, that's perfect if you want to just cut that out. And then again, with your yogurt, we have to see the sugar amount. So if you want to either take a picture or use one that you always purchase and clean it out and then just, again, throw it in a box. So the deal, I know this seems like a pain, but I will tell you, schools have been having to keep this documentation for years. We used to do a nutrient analysis. I mean, I've been on staff for 12 years. They've had to keep every label for at least 20 years. I mean, like, they change it out every year, but they have to keep a box of labels for probably the last 20 years. So literally that's what will happen. We'll show up and we get a box of labels, and they save everything. They save their vegetable, they save their fruit, anything that they buy, they have to save their label. It feels like. So I know it seems like a lot, but schools have been having to keep every label forever and ever and ever and ever. So just make sure if you're wanting to count it as a whole grain, we have to have the label. If you're going to count the breakfast cereal, we have to have the label, and the same with yogurt. And again, juice, just when we were talking about whole grain, that we'll take back money for that. If you serve juice more than once per day, we'll also take back money for that as well. So the menu as served form. So this is where you put on there, you know, what you served, all the components, how much. Make sure you guys will all be regular. So if you can just click the regular box at the top. We have to know what item you served was whole grain. So you can check the boxes so it's whole grain, or you can write whole grain on there, but we have to know. And then we also need to know, indicate the type of milk served. So we've been going for about 2 hours. Do you guys want to take like a 10-minute break? We don't have a whole lot more to go. I mean, we have a little bit, but let's just go ahead and take a 10-minute break. I'll be here if you want to type me. You can type me a question, or I can answer questions via microphone. But let's take like a 10-minute break. I have 1:50 on my computer, and let's try and convene back at 2. That we can stretch, get something to drink, go to the bathroom. Okay, we're on the tail end of this. Yay, yay, yay. Yeah, thank you guys for being patient. This is the first time we've had little trainings on Zoom, but they're like a little 1 hours. We didn't know how this would go over. We didn't know how this would work. There's some things that I do know that I would like to add to this or to make it a little bit, because we usually have handouts, and I'm usually can read the room to figure out what we need to talk about. But I want, big and foremost, regardless, I want to make sure your questions get answered. So at any time, please feel free to type or just say, hey, I have a question about something, because it's really important that you guys feel like you understand everything, or if you have any questions, like that's why we're here. But we'll go ahead and get started back. And also with this training, regardless, even though we're doing it Zoom wise, we still want to keep it very small. So we have very few on today. We try to keep it around 10 to at least 20. And the reason for that is so you guys can ask questions and can be very involved. When we have bigger groups, we want you to ask questions, but we won't do it in this type of setting where we usually, like I said, we shut off the microphones. But we just want to make sure you guys feel like you're getting everything answered. But we will keep going. So we went through the menu as served forms. Okay. So make sure when you're on the menu as served form that you have at least the menu posted. The menu's all out there. So what you can do on the menu as served form is, and I'm going to go ahead and go to the next page so you can see this is an example of the menu as served, or we also call it a production record. So with the menu as served form, you can, so a lot of people I know, like for instance on this one for lunch, it says spaghetti sauce with ground beef, spaghetti noodles, green beans, peaches, and milk. A lot of times people will serve the same like main dish and vegetable together. You can pre-fill that out. Like the menu, you can pre-fill out. If you know, you're like, you may not always know the fruit, and you can leave that. But like I have a lot of people that they're like, oh yeah, every Tuesday we do oatmeal for breakfast, and then we do spaghetti with green beans, and then at snack that day, for instance, like this one, they always have goldfish crackers. You can pre-write that stuff in, and you can even pre-write in like cornflakes, like this one, bananas. If you have like a cycle menu, you can do all that. You just cannot pre-put in there like the amounts, because it could change because of the amount of kids you have. So during the summer, it may be, your lunch may be a lot higher than it would be during the summer months. So if you have spaghetti and stuff, you can put ground beef, or you can put spaghetti noodles, but just don't enter in the amounts. You can do that on the day that you actually serve it, of how much you're actually serving. So this is an example that you can definitely do. Is like, for instance, on the cereal, it's kind of highlighted. It says 1 32-ounce box of cornflakes. We have to know amounts and measurements. With here, it says 7 pounds of bananas. What you can also do, which I told my centers I felt was much easier, unless you just go out and buy bananas, or unless you have a scale, it's really hard to know that. How did you get 7 pounds of bananas? For me, I tell people if one average size banana equals a half a cup of fruit, then if you serve 20 bananas, you can put 20 bananas in there to make it easier. And then like here, they serve 2 15-ounce cans. Under the meat, under lunch, it says 2. And then I know it is referred to a hashtag at this moment, but we refer that as a pound. So 2 pounds of 20% ground beef. So just make sure you're very, very detailed when you write down your menu as served form. We have to know amounts. We have to make sure that you served enough food. And then don't forget in your breakfast, lunch, and snack, where it says the total children served. And because you're only serving 3 meals per day, that should pretty much match your meal count worksheet. If you were serving more than that, it would be different, because you can only claim 3 meals per child per day. So it's just a lot more work. But really, your menu as served form, the amounts should be pretty close. Because, I mean, you may have, it says 17, but in the middle of meal service, another child came. And so you really had 18 kids for breakfast. So we understand, but they should pretty much match. So documentation component. So documenting components, and that is spelled wrong. I need to fix that. The descriptions and amounts of food prepared for meal service must be documented on the menu as served forms. You can put anything in there in like cups. You can do things in pounds or ounces. You can do any number of specific can size or size of box. An example, like the 2 number 10 cans. The number 10 cans are this big, huge, 100 and some odd ounces. And then you can do like a half of a 32-ounce box that was mentioned in the previous slide. So just be detailed. You don't have to be so like I served, unless you're really measuring out like I served 15 cups of cornflakes. You can do it by about how much that you serve. Like, oh, I have a 32-ounce box, I used the whole thing, or I used half of it. That works too. You don't have to make it as difficult. So one thing we are going to talk about is the food buying guide. Now this food buying guide is also located in the App Store, which is great. If you type in USDA, I think, or you can type in food buying guide, it will pull up an app, and the outside of the app, it will say USDA FBG underneath it, but it's, the top part is green, it says USDA, and the bottom part is kind of that brown color, like this, when we're talking about the side of the our application, and it has like an apple and stuff in it. But you can do that app, and that app is so cool. If you're at the store, or a matter of fact, when I was in the field, because that food buying guide is so heavy and so big, and things can change in it, and we don't always get the updated pages. So I would use the app when I was out in the field working, because everything that we give you is exactly what we use to do the review. So, so don't think like when we're like, how did you get this information? Literally, we give you everything. Everything that we use during the review, we gave you when you came on the program. So the food buying guide is one that people just don't actually utilize enough. And I'm going to kind of talk about it here in just a minute. Anything that you find in the food buying guide, except for the very, 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 very back section, they're kind of color coded. It's called the other section. But if you can find it in the meat section, it's considered a meat. If you find it in the vegetable section, it's considered a vegetable. If you can find it in the fruit, a fruit, etc. So if you find it in the book, then that means it's a credible item and you can serve it. At the very back, it's called the other, and back there it has like butter and cream cheese and those things. It's just an other. They don't count towards the program. Bacon is one back there. Pepperoni is back there. Those don't count on the program. We've had some additions. So like popcorn, I told you, is an addition. It may not be in the big book, but it should be on the app. But again, one serving size, just so you're aware, one serving size of popcorn is 3 cups. So if you do serve popcorn, that's what it does, is it's because it's so fluffy and it's so light. So you have to have so much to serve. That's why the food buying guide comes in really, really handy to tell you how much. So this is what I used to tell people, like, especially when it comes to the meat, I mean, with everything, but how I best describe the food buying guide and the concept of it is we were talking about 2 tablespoons equal 1 ounce of meat. Well, when USDA talks about like they want children to get 1 ounce of meat or 2 ounces of meat, they mean 1 or 2 ounces of meat. They want them to ingest that. So an example is we were used to talk about on the bread's grains chart, the bread and the grain item. On that, so the more sugar it has in it, the higher the quantity they need. Before you could not do sugar. So example is if you, at the time when you could serve a brownie, you had to serve a 4-ounce brownie to a 6 to 12-year-old to get 1 ounce of grain equivalent, where you could serve pretzels, and pretzels have so much grain in it, you only had to serve 0.7 ounces. So you have 0.7 versus 4 ounces because they want them to ingest that much grain. But so like we'll talk about, I'll go in more with the food buying guide. So whether you're serving, and it also tells you, like, the reason they call it a food buying guide is it also helps you know how much to buy. One, will the meal meet the requirements for the appropriate child nutrition program? How many servings will you get from a specific quantity of food? So it also not just telling you how much to buy, but how much do you open up? What quantity of the raw product will provide the amount of ready to cook food called in for the recipe, and how much food will you need to buy? That is the purpose of the food buying guide. This right here, and if you can serve it on child nutrition programs. So the significance of this book is pretty big, but it just looks kind of daunting, and I do understand that. So again, these are the sections. The other food, if it's in other foods, it does not count, but they do have them listed. That's where bacon is, that's where pepperoni is. So if you see something back there, again, these can be served, but they don't count towards any product. So when you open it up, if you look at any of the pages in the food buying guide, like in the book, you'll see these 6 columns. You'll have the food as purchased, the purchase unit, the servings per purchase unit, serving size per meal contribution. If you have a large center, it's a purchases unit for 100 servings, which schools use that a lot, and then any additional information. And I'll go over these columns so it's not quite so daunting. So this is my favorite example. I kind of actually changed the example yesterday because this one's my favorite. So this is a copy straight from the food buying guide that I Googled. You can Google it. You can, again, it's also on an app. The app does look a little bit different. It doesn't have everything in there, whatever you type in. If you type it in and it pulls up, that means it's in there, and then it pulls up. And I think to me, it's a little bit easier to read than the book, than having these columns. So this is the example of ground beef, fresh or frozen. So if you can see, that's what it is in column 1, is it's telling you this is ground beef, 24% fat. I probably should do the one underneath it. That's my favorite one because most people buy 80-20 ground beef. So if you actually look at the second one, that's your 80-20 ground beef. In column 2, this is how you purchase it. So you're purchasing it by the pound. So if you buy it by the pound, so if you buy 1 pound of 80/20 hamburger meat in column 3, that means you'll get 11.8 ounces of ground beef. So what that means is everything that's a pound is 16 ounces. 16 ounces is a pound. So what this tells me is if I buy 80/20, which is in the second one down, I know the ones with the arrows, it's the one underneath it. It says beef ground, fresh or frozen, no more than 20% fat. So if I bought 80/20 ground beef by the pound in the second column, I will get 11.8, and if you go to column 4, 1 ounces of cooked lean meat. So what I tell people is if you're buying meat, like I know it's 16 ounces, but when you cook it, it shrinks. It takes into consideration the fat. So between ground beef and chicken will cook down to 11.2 ounces per, so 16 ounces will shrink to 11.2 ounces of 1 ounce of cooked lean meat. So what I tell people, if you're gonna buy meat, like chicken or raw chicken or raw ground beef, instead of thinking 16 ounce to a pound, I say think of 11 ounces to a pound. So if you have, say 10 kids, you need 1 pound of ground beef. And say they're all 1 to 2 year olds, they only need 1 ounce of meat. So if you had 10 kids, you only need 1 pound. But if you have 15 kids, you would need more than that, because 1 pound, when you cook it, shrinks down to 11.8 ounces of meat. It shrinks. And of course, the more fat that's in it, the more it shrinks. It doesn't get below 11. So, but if you do buy 90, or this one says 15% fat, 15 or 10%, this has changed just a little bit, but you get 12 servings in that. So the less fat, you get more servings out of it, because when you cook it, the fat comes out and it shrinks down the product. Does that make sense? So that is what it's good for, is to let you know. But I tell people, instead of thinking 16 pounds of meat to a pound, think of 11, just to be safe. Just take the point, whatever, off the end, and just think 1 pound equals 11 ounces of meat. And you'll be safe when you're cooking and serving. Or when you're cooking it, you'll be safe. So if you have 30 kids that need 1 ounce of meat, I would cook 3 pounds of meat, 3 pounds of beef. Does that make sense? Did I explain that okay? Because the food buying guide can be hard. Like I said, the app is fantastic. It's much easier, I feel, to read. But if you're at the grocery store, like, oh my goodness, Vienna sausages. I wonder if the kids would eat that. I wonder if it counts. Then what I would do is, all you have to do is type it in, and yes, Vienna sausages is in the food buying guide. So is tripe, so is ox, so is alligator. There's a lot of stuff in the food buying guide. If it's in there, you can serve it. That's why it's so thick. So standardized recipes, these are fantastic. We sent everybody some whenever they first came on the program. We have recipes. They came from USDA. You can also click on this link or even type in USDA recipes and get them. So they're on Team Nutrition. The one thing with the recipes is if you can, so the daycare and the school recipes are the same recipes. The only difference is the schools are 50 servings and 100 servings, where the childcare side is 12 and like 24 ounce servings, or 25. And I forgot what the lower part is, but that's the only difference. They're the same recipes, it's just the number of servings. So if you're a larger center, you may want to do the school recipes instead, because again, those go to 50 and 100 servings. They're great recipes. You can play with them. Like I've heard the spaghetti one's not that great. However, you can play with the spices. If you use any like spaghetti, the chicken and noodles is really good. The stew is really good. There's lots of things that's what I eat when I go to schools. But what I would do is make the recipe as it is. And then you can always play with the spices. I would not change the amount of meat that's in it. I would not change the amount of bread that's in it. I wouldn't change the amount of vegetables that are in it, because when you serve it, it will tell you at the bottom of the recipe, like if you say 1 cup of spaghetti gets you 2 ounces of meat and 2 servings of bread. So don't mess with that, but you may play with the spices in it. Like you may not like as much, you may want more garlic, you may want something else. But just as long, if you use the recipes, don't change the amount of the fruit, you know, the vegetable or the bread or the meat that's in it, but you can definitely adjust the spices. And what you would do is for instance, you say you use a recipe, you don't have to write everything down per se that on your menu of syrup forms. So say you pull a recipe for spaghetti, and I don't know what I'm just gonna say it's D15. I don't think that's right, but you can put D15 and then put like 50 servings, and then we'll need that recipe, and then we'll do the calculations for you. We can do that as well. But they do have some really good recipes out there. Deep fat frying, it's not allowed. I haven't seen anybody do this in years. It's not allowed at daycares. It's any food that's submerged in hot oil. If you could actually technically still pan fry. I don't see people do that either anymore, but you cannot deep fat fry. That is not allowed. So, if you don't mind typing in, do you do pre-plate meals or do you do family style? Just want to kind of get an idea of what you do. Perfect, family style. And I'm going to talk about the differences between the two and the pros and cons. So if you pre-plate a meal, you have to put all components on that plate on the first try, no exception. So if you're doing like spaghetti with green beans and peaches and milk, you have to put whatever the grade is, you have to put that on the plate, that what is required on the plate first time go around. If you do family style, what family style is you put everybody's amount that they're supposed to have in a bowl. So with family style, the kids are also supposed to serve themselves. And at certain ages, they may need a little bit of assistance, but I will tell you, it's required in Head Starts that they do family style. And with family style, the kids do not have to put everything on the plate. Except if you're Head Start, they do require that they still put the full amount on the plate. But as long as it was served out and in the bowl, you're fine. What I like about family style is I feel like a lot of people have told me they think the kids eat better and they feel that there's less waste. And the reason being, is an example I like to use is I love peas. I've never been a fruit eater. I prefer vegetables way over fruit. And so like I was at a daycare center and it was pre-plated and all the kids put, they had peas and only one kid ate their peas and the rest of the kids threw all their peas away. Well, I'm like, man, if they did family style, I like peas. I would have ate half the peas, but I would have given my fruit to somebody else if I didn't want it. But if it's on your plate, you can't share your plate, but you can, what's in the bowl, I think you have less waste because people are eating more of what they want versus just letting it go to waste sitting on a plate. But again, that's my own personal opinion. Like I said, with family style, people are like, well, they're so young. I've seen 1-year-olds pour themselves milk. I've seen 1-year-olds really pretty much serve themselves. Like I said, teachers can help, but that's kind of the whole point of it. So an example too is they say the reason they eat better, like an example is sandwiches. I've heard like with a little kid, they needed the full sandwich to get the full amount of meat, but they only wanted to give them half the sandwich at one point and give them another half later. Well, you can't do that. If their total 1 ounce of meat is on the whole sandwich, you have to give them the whole sandwich at once. Now, if you're family style, you can give them half and they can go back and eat the other half. Sometimes with little kids, if their plate's too full, they get very overwhelmed and they actually don't eat as well. And some kids, my cousin was like this, it has to be their idea. So if they put it on their plate, then they usually eat it much better. So, but again, with pre-plated, everything has to be on the plate in the amount of serving that is required. Family style, the servings just have to be in the bowl. It does not have to be on their plate. It just has to be in the bowl. And then once it's done, then you can just empty out the bowl. But again, I've heard that plate waste is a little bit less with family style. And it is required if you are a Head Start. I do know that. So I do like family style. And we talked about family style. Allows children and adults to serve themselves from common serving bowls and food platters of food. And just something else, when you do family style for your adults, the adults have to have the same amount of food as the kids do. And I get it's not quite fair when they're 1 versus someone who's in with six-year-olds. I'm not saying that they can't have more food later, but really they have to have the same amount of food on their plate. They can't have more than what the kids have when they're sitting there eating with them, if your parents eat with them, or adults. Again, family style, place enough food at each table to provide the required portion sizes. We were talking about milk earlier. So for instance, and this, I think it also helps with allergy situation. So say you have a parent that they want their kid to have almond milk. That's just what they want. The parent buys it, they bring it, but you want to claim the meal. And to claim the meal, you don't have a doctor's note. You have to give them milk. So what you can do also is, as long as that kid's portion is in the bowl or their portion is in the pitcher, you can still claim the meal. Because technically everybody's portions were all portioned out to them. So just FYI on that. They don't have to take it in their cup, but as long as their serving is in there, that works. Okay. And serving sizes, children and adults may take smaller portions. Again, if you do family style, they don't have to have the full amount. And actively encourage children and adults to take a full serving, which is required, I know, in Head Start. If the food is refused, do not force it. What we've been told, we've had a lot of centers that have done like a thank you bite. Like, can you please just put it on your plate and then eat a bite out of it? And then we call it a thank you bite. And meals are reimbursed as long as all food components, again, are offered and in the bowl. And you do, if you do not, no one has infants, correct? So if you don't have, if you have infants, let me know, because if you don't, I won't talk about infants. If you claim infants. Okay, 2. Okay, perfect. I'll just briefly talk about infants. If you have more questions about infants, let me know. Because infants, they seem like they're easy, but I swear they're the hardest. They are the hardest. So we only have 2 age groups right now, which we used to have 3. And it's birth through 5 months and then 6 months through 11 months are the 2 age groups we have. And infants are considered 0 to 1 year of birth. Now, meals are reimbursable when a child is breastfed on site. That is something that's a newer thing. It provides, so with breastfed, provides more nutritious meals and snacks. Oh, that's the point of infant meals. Juice can no longer be served at all if they're under 1. Cheese food or cheese spreads are no longer creditable, which again, I've never seen a cheese food, especially in a center, so you're not doing that anyway. You can now do yogurt and eggs, whole eggs, which were not allowed before, which I never understood why yogurt was not allowed, but those are things that you can now serve to infants. You can serve expressed milk. So expressed milk is breast milk, but it's been, the parent has already pumped and it's there, you can serve it. So with reimbursement when it comes to breast milk, you can offer less than the minimum serving size of breast milk. I mean, obviously if the parent is coming in to breastfeed, you don't know how much the child's getting, but on the menu of serve form, you can just put breastfed or breast milk and you can put like an asterisk because you don't know. Now, if it's expressed where the mom pumped, you can just tell us how much milk the mom gave. We understand that sometimes the parent, like, they only want them to have breast milk. So even if they're not getting enough, it's still okay because it's breastfed, it's breast milk. But if they're on formula is when you're required to serve, essentially you have to serve the required amount. And we do understand that kids are feed on demand, so they're not going to be set to a certain time. If you can promote breastfeeding by allowing, like I said, a parent can come in to breastfeed, a parent or guardian supplies expressed milk, and the milk that is produced and expelled, again, from the breast, that's what expressed milk is, breast milk. So you can also serve breast milk past age 1. It can be served at any age after 1. It can be served as fluid milk. Again, a parent can come on site to breastfeed or, again, give you expressed. So breast milk after the age of 1 may be served in a combination with another milk type. After age 1 is when they are required to get the full amount. So even say if the child is 1, like 1.5, the mom is only expressing, like, giving you about a half a cup for each meal service, which I guess that's required. Say it's 1/4 of a cup, then you really need to provide the 1/4 cup of whole milk. If the parent says no, I would definitely try to get a doctor's note on that, because after age 1, they really have to have the amount that is required. Total. It can be a combination, but they really should be getting the total amount. So birth through 5 months, breast milk or infant formula is the only thing that's actually required. My niece is 3 now. I have a niece that's 5 and a niece that's 3. And in between the two is when they really change things a lot. So, I mean, I know that kids are now getting food like at 4 months of age, which is okay. It's just, it's not required until they get a little bit older. The serve, they have to have a minimum of 4 to 6 fluid ounces. And that is, now if you have any foster kids, which I know it's very rare that some centers have had foster. So if they're getting less than that, but they're getting fed more often. So essentially if they're getting in a day period, if they're getting 12 to 18 ounces of breast or of milk or of formula, and the day that they're there, you can claim 3 meals. So that's just kind of how that goes. And we understand too that they may not drink all the 4 ounces or 6 ounces all at once, but I know with, use DHS rules, if it's less than the 4 ounces, you're not supposed to claim it unless you serve it to them all in the time that's allowed by DHS. I think you have an hour. So if maybe they drink first of it and then they wait like another 20 minutes and then drink the rest, say they do 3 ounces and do a rest of 1 ounce, as long as they're kind of getting, again, 12 to 18 ounces per day, you can claim the 3 meals. It's kind of a weird thing. So promoting develop readiness. So the delay of introduction of solid food till 6 months of age, like I said, my niece started trying foods at 4 months of age. Most infants are not ready to consume solid foods until midway through the first year, and introducing solid foods too soon could increase the risk of obesity. So documenting on-site breastfeeding, again, just recording the total amount of mother breastfeeds is not required. You don't know the amount. Acceptable ways to document, again, is just put breastfed on site or mother on site or an asterisk or just something to let us know. So iron fortified formula, if the center or the parent can provide one component of the meal, but that component has to meet requirements to be able to be claimed. And a lot of parents will bring their own formula. And for it to be, it has to be iron fortified, which is usually not hard to do. If it's not iron fortified, you would need a doctor's note to claim that meal. But really, honestly, most are all iron fortified. We don't really have the issue here in Oklahoma due to where we're at. But it can't, apparently, like Belgium formula is a hot commodity, or some people from Mexico. It has to be an FDA approved formula. So it has to be from here in the States. And you are required to offer one type of formula at your center. You can choose and you can tell the parents, hey, I have Walmart brand iron fortified formula. But you do have to have an infant formula on hand when you have infants. Again, infants may not drink the entire serving of formula, but it's reimbursable as long as the minimum serving is offered. So I will caution you, like when the children get older to like, you know, 8, and this is the one thing that drove me crazy when they redid the meal patterns. So when kids get to like, especially 8 months old, they eat more solid foods and they don't drink as much formula. Well, they still require 6 ounces of formula from from 6 months and on. And so if they're not drinking that much, you either have to dump out the rest of the formula or they have to drink it to claim the meal. If I was a parent and I had a very expensive formula, I would not be happy if my child was drinking 4 ounces of formula and you were making 6 ounces just so you could claim a meal, because you're dumping out literally a bottle a day. So just keep that in mind. If they start not drinking the formula like they're supposed, you know, I mean, and I get it, when they're eating more, they're not going to drink as much. I would definitely maybe have the parent do a meal waiver form and then no longer claim that infant until they get to be 1, if they're not serving the correct, or if they're not drinking all the formula. Because I would hate for you to waste formula. It's just so expensive. Again, any leftover should be properly stored in accordance with local health and safety requirements. And I believe with DHS, they give you 1 hour to use that formula after it's been made. So with American Academy of Pediatrics, when is developmentally ready? Well, they usually say it's when a baby can sit in a chair with good head control, opens mouth for food, moves food from a spoon into the throat, and doubles in birth weight. And it is important to search for solid foods. It's recommended by American Academy of Pediatrics. Infants should be offered solid foods starting at 6 months. Like I said, my niece started at 4 months, which is very common. If they are developmentally ready, centers should communicate with the parent. There shouldn't be a bullet there, but I would highly suggest, if you have infants, when the parents want, because the parents are going to tell you or what they want you to feed them. Like, okay, now we're trying squash, or now we're trying whatever. I would definitely have them put it in writing what they're serving now. And it'll kind of come into play here with the infant meal patterns. So when you see the infant meal pattern 0 to 2, 0 to 4, 2 ounces to 0 to 4 tablespoons, what that means is if there's a 0, it doesn't have to be served. However, once they start having that item, then you have to start giving that item to them in components. And all the serving sizes will be the same as the 0 to whatever. And it gets so confusing, it really does. And I understand that. I'm gonna look, let me see here if we have something that shows more of so even though it says 0 to 2 and 0 to 4 tablespoons, once a child starts eating, say for instance, so what was interesting with my niece, the youngest one, they did not do cereal with her at all. That used to be the thing, is you start with cereal, then you start with fruit, then you do vegetables. They don't do that anymore. So that's why all components start pretty much with the 0, because they may start with meat first. They may start with my niece, they started with fruit first. So, but what we also understand is maybe you're trying fruit this week, and then next week it didn't go well. The next week we're going to try vegetables, or maybe someone had a reaction to something, so we're not going to try fruit. We're going to go straight to vegetables, or we're going to go back to cereal. So that's why I would suggest from the parent, you would get something in writing about what to do. And not just that, but I think it kind of protects you a little bit. So it'd be like, why'd you give my kid, you know, bananas or whatever? You can say, well, you told me this is what you're starting to feed them now. That way it doesn't come back on you that you fed them something that they really didn't want them to have at the moment. You do not have to feed them baby food. It does not have to be from a baby food jar. You can feed them, like for instance, bananas, you can mash it up. If you're doing sweet potatoes, you can mash it up. I've had some centers that they do fruit with their extra fruit, they puree it. It just has to be, the texture has to be correct for their age, but it does not necessarily mean that you don't have to buy baby food per se to feed the infants. Foods from all food components may be served around 6 months old, again, when developmentally ready, but it could be a variety of things. Like I said, my niece never had cereal. She never was given infant cereal at all. That's just, they kind of did things different with her than they did. I mean, with the pediatrician, they had the same pediatrician, but they just did things a little bit different. Again, I would suggest it says an optional written statement, what approved food components, because we understand too, you may be giving us something, but they're having a rash, say from fruit, and they don't know what they're eating. So maybe we're just going to try vegetables now. But when we look at but if we come over and see it, like we're doing a review, and we come over and there's a 9-month-old, and you're like, nope, we're not claiming any food for them, but we come in and they're eating a full plate of food, then, I mean, once they start eating the food, you have to start giving that to them. And then that's when you can claim it. So it's just kind of gotten a lot trickier. Does that make sense with the infants? Like, I understand when you look at all the ranges for all the components is 0, 0, 0s, but once they start having it, and we understand they be switching, like, okay, fruit this week, okay, now next week we're doing vegetable. But once they start eating and eating and eating, and they're eating it, you have to start putting it on the production records, and you're again responsible for the food for the infant. And again, it just has to be textual ready. It can be baby food. It can be food from a plate. It's however you choose to do it, that's fine. Just as long as it's development, the texture and stuff, or the consistency is correct for that age. Some infants may eat certain foods 1 week or day, but not the next. Again, we understand that. Meals and snacks consistent with eating habits should not be disallowed. So again, I really encourage the written statement. I think it protects you, and then it also kind of lets us know where we're at of what they're trying. And they may say all fruits or all vegetables, but I think it just helps, because you're not going to give an infant something that, I mean, especially with a new parent, you're not going to give an infant something the parents are not, they're already probably expressing to you, okay, we're doing this now. I mean, they're probably already expressing that to you, but it'd just be great if you can get that in writing, or just at least you have notes to kind of help with that process. And again, parents and guardians may provide only one creditable food component. Most of the time it has been formula. We see that quite often at a center, because every child gets a different formula, and it's hard. It's really hard to buy, you know, if you have one formula, you know, not all of them are going to take the same one. So a lot of times the center will pay for the food, the other foods, and then have the parents supply the formula. Oops. Uh-oh. Did I stop the screen share? There we go. My mouse is acting crazy. Okay. And then again, once an infant shows sign of developmental readiness, that's when you start giving them the food. Prepare foods with the right texture. We've kind of talked about all this. Fruits and vegetables. Again, the minimum service size is 0 to 2. Required at all meals. So fruit and vegetable, once they start having that, it is required at all meals. So it's required at breakfast, at lunch, and it would also be required at snack once they have it. With juice, it's not allowed at all. It used to be for if they're 8 months or older. It is no longer allowed unless you have a doctor's note. And then again, you can now do yogurt. You can now do whole eggs. They're all creditable for infants. I think before they said just the egg yolk, but now they came out to say that you can do the whole egg. They can be served to infants. And again, yogurt, again, they also have to meet the sugar requirements. Cheese, again, those are common examples of shredded or sliced, but cheese can be given, just not cheese product. Cheese foods and spreads are not allowed, which they are not for the other kids as well. We talked about the iron fortified formula. Just make sure that when you do infant, you have to do infant cereal at breakfast or lunch, but at snack time, you can give them ready to eat cereal, and ready to eat cereal would be like Puffs or Cheerios or anything like that. So it's really weird. I don't understand it, but you have to do infant cereal in the morning or lunch, but at snack, you can serve ready to eat cereal. And again, they follow the same sugar requirements. And none of you guys say that you contract your meals, like you're not with a school or anything like that. Let's see here. That's my chat box. Here we go. Okay. We are almost done. It's no one contracts. So on page 237 is where you start your institution originals. So just a little FYI, I don't think anybody here is multi-sided. Perfect. And then this is it. We finished the training. So if you guys have any questions, you guys can even send me questions privately. I'm also going to put my email address in here into the chat. I'm going to go ahead. Let's see here. We will send you a certificate that you came. I'm going to give you my email address. So if you don't want to ask any questions here, you can email me. You may also want to email me. We will give you your CECPD credit. So if you want to email me that as well, and like I said, I'll get it back to you. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thanks for muddling through this with me for the first time. I know some things I need to change, but this is our first time to do this. We're hoping we can do in person very soon because it's just much harder with stuff like this to do via Zoom, and it's just long. So, but we appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Again, if there's anything that you need, if there's anything I can send you, any papers, anything that we talked about, I can send to you. But again, thanks for coming, and you guys have a really good day.
I have one question. What did you say email you for?
If you want to email me your CECPD number, we can give you credit for that.
Okay.
Because we usually have it on our sign-in sheet, but
okay, I got you.
You know, yeah. And then we'll email you your certificate that you were here.
Okay. Okay, good deal. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for being our guinea pigs this month. Oh, it's good for some things, but some of them, it's just too hard. It's hard.
Okay. All right, so we log off, or?
You just log off. You're good to go. There should be like a hang up button or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Bye,
welcome.